Leo Abraham said, a really cool engineer, guitarist again from the UK. He said sometimes it's important to have a piece of gear that inspires you. And it's something that maybe sometimes we forget about, that what we do is emotional, it's music, it's about storytelling, it's about connecting with people in some way. So there you go. If, $500 for headphones inspires you more than 90 for a plastic version of it, hey, maybe they are worth, you know, investing a little bit more.
This is the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records on your own, wherever you are, DIY style. Let's go. Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band Podcast. I am your host, Benedikt. I run a mixing studio called Outback Recordings, and we mix a lot of songs here, about 200, 250 songs per year, sometimes even more than that. And a lot of these songs are done by do-it-yourself artists that record themselves at their jam spaces. And we've been doing a lot of those over the years, of course. And so we had to guide a lot of people through the recording process, help them get better tracks at the source so that we can do a better job mixing. And all the knowledge, the insights, and all the learnings from that, we've put into this platform called the Self-Recording Band, which is where we help you make better recordings at your jam spaces as well. So if that sounds good, then you're in the right place if you want to make better recordings from your jam space. And this is on YouTube in video version. It's also on all the podcast platforms. So if you discover this on Spotify but want to watch your content, go to YouTube. And if you want to listen on the go, search for the Self-Recording Band on any podcast platform. As always, I'm not doing this on my own here. I'm doing this with my friend and wonderful co-host, Manelito from Spain, Manel Espinosa Berenguer from Madrid. Hello, Manel.
Hi, Benny. How are you? I just had to rush a little bit to get my power nap before the show, but I'm all right. Do you like power naps?
Power naps. Yes, I love power naps. So you had one? Yep, siesta in Spain. Yeah, awesome. Good to have you here. And today, it's not just Manel and myself. We have a wonderful guest today. And his name is Rok Gulič from Ollo Audio. So welcome, Rok. Thank you so much for joining us on this show today.
Hey everyone. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time.
Sure.
Ollo Audio is a headphones brand that we really stand behind. As you know, whenever we feature gear on this show, whenever we feature specific things, it's always stuff that we really actually use and know and love and stand behind. Same is true for Ollo Audio. I've been using their headphones for a long time. It's not the ones that I'm wearing right now. These are closed headphones that I just use for the podcast. But I have the Ollo S4X, and I love them. I mix on them all the time. They're open back headphones, beautiful. Rok is wearing a pair of Ollos, of course, at the moment, so you can look at them. This not the model that I use, but looks pretty similar. And yeah, it's an awesome brand, and I have a lot of questions about headphones in general, mixing workflow on headphones, challenges, headphones versus speakers, all these things. And then, of course, I have some Ollo-specific questions, and I'm very excited to finally get to talk to you today, Rok, about your headphones and the whole topic in general.
Fantastic. Let's go.
Awesome. Cool. So, first of all, can you tell us what led you to founding Ollo? Why did you want to come up with a headphone brand? And, haven't there been enough headphones out there already? Or what was the motivation for you to build headphones?
It's a really cool question. I mean, of course, there has to be something in you, like a motivation or a wish or, childhood trauma or something, to start a company. But for me, it was basically kind of like a coincidence. So I got my first two kids. I got twins. And when that happens, obviously, I was not able to mix any longer in the same room with them or not even in the next room. So naturally, I tried to find headphones to help me out. And I've learned quite quickly the painful lesson that it's really difficult to find, a suitable pair of headphones for mixing, especially if you've never done that before. If you're like always been mixing on speakers, and if you're, a stupid teenager like I was, you have you're always blasting those speakers way too loud, and you're experiencing all the vibrations and bass and kick in your body and your chest. And that's a missing sensation, a tactile experience that's completely missing from headphones. And it takes some time to learn to mix, without all of this visceral experience. So on that note, when I was researching different headphones, I just couldn't really get my mix to translate basically to my car or anywhere. So out of that came the idea of, I got to figure out how does that work? What can I do? And I stumbled upon the tactile transducers, if you're familiar with those. So those are basically subwoofers, but they are silent. They don't have a membrane. They're not pushing the vibrations into the air, rather into the material or, a human body. So I started developing that first,
Oh, really?
as trying to figure out, how can I get that visceral experience from a studio when I'm blasting, at 120 dB probably, and push that into a headphone kind of format. So that worked kind of well, but still didn't, perform as I would like it to. But what happened as a side effect is that I've learned to listen to music and mixes with headphones. And while experiencing that and researching that combination of a tactile sound and headphones, I've learned about the headphone soundstage and how things translate slightly differently between speakers and headphones. And on that note, eventually I started developing my own headphones kind of like for fun. As it turns out, all my friends wanted one. So it was like, okay, buddy, I'll make you one. And then it was another buddy and another buddy. And all of a sudden it had to turn into, you got to give me like $50 for this. I just can't. And eventually, like a year later, there we go. All the audio was kind of born out of this mess.
Wow, that's a cool story. I had no idea you were developing these tactile things. Like there's I have to mention. I think it's
you can still actually Google it. So if you go to Google and try to figure it out, so all audio tactile
Oh,
enter,
really?
you'll probably get some reviews of stuff because there's like 20 or 40 units made.
Okay.
It was called a play to me system because it's kind of silent and then only plays to you.
Oh.
It was a tactile transducer mounted into a chair together with a headphone and the amplifier.
Oh, the whole thing. So it's
The whole thing.
Okay. The only thing that I know of is I think it's called the sub pack. You know that one where it's a similar kind of thing, but it's not the full system. It's just an additional thing you can get. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna find that, or Manel, let's find that, and then I'm gonna put it. I'll do that, and then let's put it in the show notes.
Okay.
The link below that. That's cool. So, was the first kind of models that you created, were those already the kind of like metal wood and like awesome things you do now? Because that's another thing I should mention about Ollo. You see it on Rok's picture, like image now if you're on YouTube. But they don't just sound great, they also look really nice, and they are made out, I don't know if you avoid plastic entirely or for the most part, but a lot of it is metal and wood, and you can easily take them apart and replace things, which I love about these headphones. So were your first prototypes or first models also like that? Of these materials? Yeah.
The first prototypes and the first mini series of 30 or 40 units, they were made in my dad's garage. So it was just drills and nuts and bolts and stuff. It's very garage style, but that's how things start. That's where you learn the most. That's where you figure it out, basically. This philosophy stayed with Ollo. Because it's ingrained into basically who I am as an engineer. I just want to explore and play with stuff, destroy stuff, and build it again. So out of that basically came the philosophy that the headphones should be completely repairable. So we have every single bolt and nut you can buy as a spare part, which is really awesome, and not many other companies can say that. And because of that, again, further down the road, it means that I'm very confident that you cannot destroy these headphones. That's why they have 5 years warranty.
Yeah, I agree. They're very durable, and I didn't always treat mine really well, to be honest, but they survived everything so far. So that's the only thing I had to replace once was the ear pads, but that's a normal thing after a couple of years. They just, that's part of it.
It's like car brakes. You gotta
Yeah.
exchange those unless you want to get killed.
Yeah, totally. What does Ollo actually stand for?
Oh, that's a funny one. So the OLLO and the first two letters are from my first son of the twins, which is Oliver. And second one is Laura, a little bit more traditional Slovenian name. It's LO, Laura. So when you put them together, it's Ollo. And the side benefit is we were trying to get a name that will work, around the globe, that any nation, any language can pronounce and can read it. And we were also looking for something that looks nice. So yeah, there we go.
There we go. It makes sense. Cool. So, Manel, I'm going to give that next one to you because I know that for me, my journey was I had used monitors primarily for a long time because I have a pretty decent sounding room and good monitors, and I just enjoy mixing on speakers. And then later, once I was already good at mixing, I'd say I started getting into better headphones. So headphones for me were mostly a tracking thing in the beginning. And then I added the nice pair of Ollos because I wanted to be able to do more on the road, and I also wanted a second reference. And so for me, it was kind of the other way around compared to what many people do, and also compared to what I recommend, where I say in most cases, if you don't have a good room and you're starting out, I'd actually recommend starting on headphones to take the room out of the equation, and then go to speakers if you really want to, or if you have the means to do it properly. For me, it was the other way around. So Manel, I know in your case, you didn't start with a very purpose-built, really great room. You have a pair of monitors and a decent one. But I think for you, the headphones are much more important, especially in the beginning of your journey, than they were to me. And so I just want to know how you feel about the whole headphones mixing topic, what you prefer, speakers versus headphones, where you think are challenges, and maybe from your own experience now, maybe you have a couple of thoughts on that and questions for Rok. But I know that it is just much more in your workflow than it is in mine to mix on headphones.
Yeah, I would say that there's nothing that's better. It's just, it depends on your situation, like your particular situation and conditions. But I think the best is to use both if you have the chance to do it properly. Like I have my monitors here, but I use them only to compare at some points because I don't have a super treated room for those kind of things to be reliable. So I use them for some things, but I rely, I would say, 80% on my headphones. So yeah, I guess, as you said, if you don't have a proper room, then you should get good headphones, right? So yeah, I have my question for Rok. Yeah. Which probably might be a little bit silly because I'm not as gear nerd as Benny. But yeah, my question is, why do we need good quality headphones? Like, what's the difference between having, standard quality headphones to high quality ones?
Well, it's the same as why would you need studio monitors if you have a hi-fi system, It's the same thing. It's tuned differently. But also on a side note, when you're listening to headphones as a consumer, here and there you put them on, versus, that is your bread and butter, that it makes you make a living with it. And first you have to trust them. They have to be reliable, consistent, and durable enough. So obviously, if you want to have a product that's made to last and to serve professionals, all the materials that are in the product have to be at a higher level. It's not just sound; it's everything that comes with it. And the important part that people are kind of missing in this professional atmosphere, right, is that it's about support. So imagine you're mixing, a massive record. You have a deadline, and what I've heard, the deadlines lately are insane. It's like literally in 2 hours, send me something, and it's gonna go out. It has to be really reliable. But then there are also bands that, because of social media and so on, they go on tour and they produce stuff on the road, and things happen on the road. A cable will snap, somebody will steal your headphones, or you'll sit on them, or whatever happens. So the support part is extremely important. It's not just the support of, exchanging a part in the headphone or fixing it. It's much more. It's more like, are you in a very difficult situation on tour? Maybe you're in a country where there are like, poor connections for transport and stuff like that. Is there a company or, the support staff from the headphones that you're using? Can they deliver a spare part? Can they deliver a replacement or a rental unit to you by the next show? And these kind of things, I believe, are super important when it comes to professional gear. The same as with audio interface. Most of us will only have one, maybe a spare, a smaller one. But that has to work. If it dies, you're out of commission. So the support on that level is, without a doubt, at least half of what it means to have a professional product.
Yeah. That's a good one. I agree. I mean, you could argue that some of the more common, cheaper models are available pretty much everywhere, and you could just buy a new pair. But when it comes to high-end brands or like more, just better headphones, it gets more difficult. You can't get those like everywhere, and then it's very important to have that direct, connection to the company, and especially like spare parts and that. So,
on a side note, if I may jump in,
yeah,
cheaper headphones, they are produced in a mass production way process, which means that the quality control is basically, do they work? Do they produce sound or not?
Yeah.
That's the quality control, literally. So what happens is that you have two same pairs of headphones. Let's go up to about 200 price tag, right?
Yeah.
And they will sound very different. To a consumer, they will sound the same, but to an audio engineer, where all these nuances are, everything that you care about, basically, are totally different. This is also why, for example, SonarWorks made a massive brand out of this, because the headphones, they were not consistent enough. So the calibration is not really about, at least in SonarWorks, it's not really about retuning them to something else. It's more like, let's put something on a level field first. So the tolerances that are even after calibration, for example, with the SonarWorks, are still within 3 dB. So imagine you would play with an EQ on a master channel and moving it like 2 or 3 dB up or down, and saying, all right, the move that I just did is not necessarily correct, because it could be just in my headphones the other way around or something like that. Even though you're using calibration already. Now imagine without the calibration, and imagine having, a pair of headphones for $100. You cannot call yourself an audio engineer if you do that, period.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And I actually was blown away by that, because when I got SonarWorks first and I had a couple of different headphones lying around the studio, I tried their like average calibrations on all these different models to calibrate them or get them flat. And then I always wondered, is it worth sending them in and get the custom calibration for that exact pair versus the average? And I was like, that can't be much of a difference. I really don't believe it. But then I tried it because I was curious. And it was insane. And then I also tried the same brand and model of headphones just with the average and compared. And even though you cannot do a proper A/B because there's a gap in between, even though that happens, you could still tell the difference. So it is really, every single unit is different, audibly different. And so that is true. You're right. The tolerances are just there. And so this goes back to what you said. When you have support, it means you can keep, first of all, hopefully the tolerances are lower, but also you can keep that same pair of headphones that you already got used to and repair it or replace parts and know that it will still sound the same. And it's not a new experience like swapping it out for a different unit, basically.
Yeah.
So that's basically it. Yeah, I totally agree.
The same thing happens with speakers, by the way.
Yep.
You can have add-on focals or amphion, whatever you use, same pair, exchange it, and it will sound different.
Yeah, there are tolerances, no doubt. Yeah. And also to Manel, to expand on your question a little bit, I think it's a really good question to ask, like, why is it worth getting a better pair? and I know that I remember 15 years ago when I started, I did not believe or did not know what the difference actually was between a decent 150 euro pair and like a very high end pair. So I remember that. And to add to your question, my thought is, let's say we can get the frequency response flat. This is something most people understand, that there's the frequency response part where you can say, okay, a headphone has peaks and valleys and like boosts and cuts in different frequencies. And let's assume we can get two pairs, one that's cheaper, one that's more expensive, and both are fairly flat. No headphone is really completely flat, but let's say we can do this. And there are kind of flat headphones at a pretty low price also. What is the difference that still remains? Because now people would think, okay, now I don't have any dips and peaks, and I will be able to make good decisions, right? But it's more, I think, than just the frequency response. So what do you think are the other differences in quality and what can people pay attention to when they test headphones, maybe what to even listen for other than just it being flat in terms of frequency?
The answer is the same as with speakers. Now, what do you listen to on good pair of speakers? You put them in a room, you calibrate them, the same frequency response. Yet one will sound great and the other one will be trash. So it comes, well, partially it's your personal preference, of
Yeah.
course. But also it's about the clarity of sound, which comes down to distortions and harmonics and so on. But also distortion from a room. If we're talking about speakers in a room, the shape of the room, all of these reverberation times, all of these will drastically affect how you feel in a room. And it's the same with headphone. It's still a room. It's just like super, super small and it's attached to your ear. But it's still, it's a chassis. It's a room where something happens in there. It's a speaker that has to move the air in there, and you control how that air moves, how quickly it escapes, how much it bounces around, how much of the sound from the behind the speaker comes in front of it. All of that will drastically change your experience with the headphone. It's the same thing with monitors. If you put them into a corner and you move them in and out of a corner, the whole spectrum will change. And the same is with headphones. Even if you move them slightly backwards or you move them slightly forward, you will hear that the shift, usually in high end, is quite easy to perceive. Or if you are wearing glasses that come between the ear pad and your skull, basically, there is going to be like a little gap of air leakage, and that will drop the bass dramatically. So yeah, it's about the quality of sound in terms of just objective quality of frequency response, the transients, how fast the membrane moves, how fast does it stop, all the distortion that comes from materials being, at the limits of what's possible. But it also comes from the acoustic design, which is also reflections and everything else that comes into it. So it's the same thing. What are you listening to? What in an expensive pair of headphones is that those were made specifically to sound as good as they possibly can. Many times, that means that of course the cost of producing that will be higher, and that kind of reflects in the overall price on the market. Yeah.
Yeah, speaking about price real quick, of course, Ollo headphones, they are high quality phones. They are not super cheap. But also, I think if you consider all the things we talked about, and this was something I wondered from the beginning when I first discovered your company, when you think about the materials like wood, metal, they just look very well made. They are very well made. They look high quality. They sound obviously great. It's a great philosophy behind the company. There's support. They are made in Europe, and basically a lot of it is handmade. I don't know to what degree, but overall, it seems like a very high quality package. But then, considering all of that, the price is actually not that high. So, I was always wondering how that is kind of possible, and if there is you get the feeling that there must be some kind of compromise when you consider all those things and then see the price tag. Because yes, there are cheaper models, but I don't think they're overpriced, not at all. So, curious to hear your thoughts on that.
It comes from keeping the company small. So obviously, when it gets to mass production, huge companies, let's say Sony or whatever, they will make thousands and thousands of these units. And there's this economy of scale that punches in. Of course, we cannot do that. So we can never produce a headphone that would be super cheap, super affordable. We cannot make a headphone for $150. It's impossible for a small company. So that's the mass market that goes to bigger companies. Then there's I call it like a sweet spot, the size of a company where it's like 5 to 10, maybe 15 employees, something like that, where everyone knows what they're doing and everyone are specialists in what they're doing and everyone have been doing that for multiple years, 5, 10 years. So what comes out of that is extreme optimization of all the processes, of all the supply chains, of all the parts, assembly, service, support stuff. Everything is like super optimized. So that gives us a chance to, still make a living. Yeah, now we have okay salaries. Everyone is happy, and we can still deliver a product within the range, but it's still kind of affordable. So it's not expensive. It doesn't feel expensive. We can say like $500. That's a lot of money. It is for everyone today. But is it overpriced? Is it expensive? If you consider what it does and what kind of support comes with it and the warranty that comes with it, it's really not. So that's how we can achieve that. On the other spectrum altogether is, like boutique shops where they have 1 or 2 people, 2-person, 3 maybe, doing something very, very boutique and, costs insane amount of money. And then there's like another maybe that we can also explore would be like a technology-driven company where there's so much effort and money and everything goes into R&D that they figure something out. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't even matter if it's really a good thing. It's just, it's so hyped and it's so new and so different that it sparks a new product line, which obviously has to, pay for the development in the early stages, which usually resolves into higher price tagged products. So that's just how it is. It's just the economy of scale and it's just the basic economics principles at play.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, that makes total sense. And I know some of these questions may seem basic or silly, but I just know that when people start out, especially our audience of self-recording bands who are not necessarily always professional engineers, many of them are, but not all of them. Sometimes we just wonder these things when we start out and we have this in front of us. We look at like Thomann or some website and then we see these like hundreds of different headphones and all have great reviews and all seem to be professional. And then we just don't know, should we go for the €150 pair or the 1,000 or anything in between? And then what actually to watch out for and how come that there's this price difference? So that's what I'm trying to get to these answers to clarify that for people a little bit. So Manel, when you mix primarily on headphones, and for me it's the other way around, like I said, I use headphones to double check sometimes if I'm not sure about something on my monitors, and I use them if I'm on the road, on the go, I'm traveling quite a bit, and so I can do mix revisions on headphones and that. So this is where it becomes really important for me. But in your case, where you mix primarily on headphones, yes, it takes the room out of the equation and gives you a reliable monitoring system. But are there also challenges where you think this is actually easier to do on speakers and like a little more difficult maybe on headphones? And maybe then Rok has an answer to that as well, how to overcome that. Because for me personally, maybe it's just because I'm not working primarily in headphones, but I feel it's sometimes challenging to mix on headphones. So I'm wondering to hear your thoughts. Are there benefits to mixing on speakers to you? And is anything challenging about the headphone workflow?
Well, I would say, of course, there's benefit on mixing on speakers. Like Rok said, like some minutes ago, I also like to feel the air pushing, and also the especially I guess the lower frequencies feel different, like they bump into you in some way. So yeah, I would say that's the main thing for me, and that's why I use the speakers sometimes to see, to try and see where the levels are and how that hits me or whatever. So yeah, but for example, for me, it's way easier when I'm using the headphones to do this, panning effects and all that, because I can notice that easily than on the speakers and stuff like that. So yeah, I would not say challenges, but I think the feeling is different, and it's interesting to compare how it feels on the speakers versus your headphones, and
Okay. I want to add to this because I didn't know if you were going to get to it, but like the challenge that I feel, I agree with the low end thing and the air being pushed and all that. But one of the challenges that I have on headphones is the lack of crosstalk. And I know there are solutions for that, but that is kind of a part of it. When on speakers, I always hear everything with both ears, even if it's hard panned. On speakers, if it's something's hard panned and there's no crosstalk, it's like you're deaf on one ear and it's like a different perception. And the entire imaging and the entire stereo field is just a little different. So one thing I noticed personally, and I've talked to a couple of peers of other engineers who feel the same way, is when I mix on headphones, I tend to make everything that's in the center, I tend to make that too loud in the mix because the stuff on the sides is so clear because it's right at my ear, and so the separation is so good that, for example, if I have hard panned guitars and kick, snare, and bass in the center, I can hear the details in the guitar so well on headphones that I tend to mix them too quietly, and I tend to boost the stuff, to push the stuff in the middle a little too loud. And then when I listen on other systems, I realize, oh, I got a lot of kick, snare, and vocals there, or bass, and the guitars are too quiet. And so on headphones, I always have to intentionally make the sides a little louder than I would, and kind of compensate for that. And then I know there is software to do like simulate or to bring in some crosstalk. There's all kinds of calibrations. So I wonder, Rok, if you have experienced any of these challenges, limitations that come with headphone mixing, or if you even find them as limiting, and if you have any workarounds or things you do to kind of compensate for that.
No, I think it's the same thing. You always have to, deliver a mix, and the mix should survive in the real world. But that's ultimately the goal. It's not that it's going to be perfect on every device. It's never going to be. I mean, you're not capable of making a perfect mix. No one is.
So, yeah.
That's just the truth. So, why bother with another dB here or there? It's really not about that. It's about translating the emotions and the intentions of the band or, an artist across multiple devices, multiple spectrums, multiple users and tastes and so on. So that's what we do. That's what you guys do. We just try to provide the tools to do that. So in my perspective, there are differences in terms of how something sounds on headphones versus speakers. But hey, those are the differences between a car and your speakers. Those are the differences between your speakers and a shopping mall or a live venue or a club. Any system anywhere is going to sound different than what you are using for mixing. So if you're using speakers, wherever else you're going to listen to, it's going to be different. So if you're using headphones, wherever else you're going to listen to, it's going to be different. The sound stage will collapse. It will be different. The frequency response will be different. Whatever is in front of your face will be somewhere else.
Yeah.
When you move it somewhere, to another system. So the question of, what are the challenges? The challenge is to make a mix that will work wherever it is played back. Not perfectly, it will never be perfect, but it should translate in terms of not losing the sound on the 808 kicks, for example, super low notes, drop it D notes, stuff like that, maybe Moog synthesizers that go like super low. Make sure that that is kind of represented well, regardless of the device. So that's that's level one of mixing in my, humble opinion. So when it comes down to what is left and what is right in a stereo image, does it really, matter so much? I'm sure it does, because it's all about nuances and we love that. But we are the audio engineers. We are not the final consumers. So for them, that's not going to be important. For yourself to be proud of your mix, of course, that's going to be important also to justify spending more money on better gear. That also makes sense. But in reality, it is a different experience, and all that you have to do is just understand the differences. So when I'm mixing on speakers, I need to be aware of the basic translation of those speakers that you're using and the room that you're using. That's, by the way, that's why many engineers will say, I can mix in my room with my speakers, but I cannot mix in a guest room. So why? They have the same frequency response. They're using SonarWorks, by the way. It's calibrated. What's the problem here, guys? So see, the translation is a very complex thing in a way, and we all have different opinions about what it even is. I don't know, Benedikt. Try to explain to me what is translation.
Yeah, it is difficult. So to me, it is translation means basically what you already said, that the mix that I make creates the same emotional response no matter where people listen to it. So some people will listen on earpods, some will listen in the car, some on a hi-fi, and yes, it will all sound drastically different. And things are tuned with wild EQ curves and the rooms and everything. So of course, but the essence of the song and the emotion, the general vibe needs to just come across. And at the end of the day, it's just one question, and that is, does the person like the song or not? That's all they care about. And the mix needs to transport that. And to me, translation is that this feeling I want to create happens no matter where they listen to. And I have a hard time making good decisions that I can. I think it's a confidence thing. I can make good decisions on other systems as well, but I don't feel as confident, and I need to double check and quadruple check a lot more if I'm on speakers that I don't know really well. And on my system, in my room, and with my speakers or my headphones, I just know that when I do something, I know exactly the difference it's gonna make, and I know that it just works or it doesn't. So in here, if I hit play, within 5 seconds, I know exactly what's going on. I know exactly where the problems are. I just know this room so well. And this just lets me mix with confidence. And I don't even do the car check. I just mix every single day, and I send it out to the clients before I check it in my car or everywhere else. I don't do that anymore because I really trust my system here. But I'm scared so much. Like the thought of swapping out monitors, for example. I've been using the same monitors for 12 years now, and I thought about upgrading, but it scares the shit out of me because the thought of new speakers in here, in my mind, it's like I cannot mix anymore. Everything's gonna change. Even just swapping out this desk here. I got a new desk earlier this year, switched from a bigger one to a smaller one with the Rex right in front of me. And even that move, it took me a couple days to get accustomed to that, because even the desk made such a big difference that I felt less confident about my mid-range. And so, all these things. And I don't know, with headphones, a lot of that is not relevant anymore because the room and the desk and things like that are not in the equation anymore. It's just that I perceive things differently in general on speakers compared to headphones. And I found a way for me to compensate for that. I just know myself there. It might be a total personal thing. But yeah, it's just different for me. And also, I never used, and I've tried them, but I don't use any of the can opener or crosstalk or whatever. I just use the headphones as is. And that's kind of how I feel best about them. Even though I have SonarWorks and I've tried that and I use it on my speakers, I don't use them on headphones anymore. I use the Ollos for mixing without any calibration, just the way they are. I feel like I get the best transient response. I get the best imaging, and I can just trust them the most that way. And even though I don't like the fact that there's no crosstalk and stuff like that, I just use them the way they are. But I wanted to hear your opinion on that, and if you use any of those tools, or I don't even know if I'm up to date on the latest Ollo stuff, because I've seen that you now have your own software to some degree, and you do more than I have. The S4Xs from a couple of years ago, so I don't have any of that. So maybe things have just changed, and now you also use software. I just plug them in and I listen. So
Yeah. So currently, the latest model, for your information, Benedikt, you can get it. All right. It's available for you.
I know.
It's the X1. So the X1 are an iteration, basically an improvement of the S4 and the S5 kind of puts together. And they rely heavily on acoustic design and, just basic engineering. But the market has changed in the last few years, especially after COVID. So many engineers started working, from bedrooms. This is what this podcast is all about, right? And secondly, many studios that are not like huge, that were maybe like tiny studios, kind of, went out of business during that period. And all of a sudden, there was like a massive shift in the marketplace of personal audio monitoring devices. everyone who were mixing at somebody in a studio or at their own studio on speakers had to transfer or translate somehow to headphones, and they experienced what we opened this episode with. Um, and on that note, the room emulations from Waves NX or Steven Slates or real phones, they just became more and more popular, and more people started using those. So eventually we had to respond to that, and we had to provide the people that want to have that an option to have it. And with that in mind, we started with partnering with Waves. That didn't go so well, but I'm not going to speak into details about it. And then we tried with Sonarworks. Sonarworks wasn't too interested, really. They have their own reasons, which I'm not going to disclose here. And Real Phones, it was kind of like a forgotten software. By Sonic, it's like maybe a smaller player in a way. It's like someday, Alexei just wrote me a message, hey, would you be interested? And before I read everything to the end, it was, yeah, let's have a call. So all of a sudden, in a matter of months, they were willing to adjust their software, trim it down to bare bones, and made it work with our calibration system. So right now you have the X1 with Real Phones stripped down version, and you can use the calibration file from your individual unit that comes with the X1 with Real Phones. It also works with Waves NX if you want to go down that road. So essentially what happened is that you have a headphone that is really, really nicely tuned out of the box. Then you have the individual calibration, which you would have to buy somewhere. Previously, it cost like $200 or so. It's already included with the X1, and it runs on Real Phones software, which means you have room emulation, you have different target curves. If you want to test, how will it sound on a Harman target curve, for example, you can do that. If you're interested in diffuse field target curve, you can do that as well. If you want to do in Dolby mixing, you can do Dolby. So in one, it's a one package, a holistic package that will enable you to cross-check, cross-reference whatever you're doing in multiple environments. Yes, these are simulations. They are not perfect. Of course not. But that's not the point, as mentioned before. The point is to kind of get an idea. Does your mix sound good, consistent? Will it translate? And for me personally, I think it's about colors as well. We forget about that many times. We don't talk about the character of a sound, the color of a sound, right? So how that drastically changes. And at the end of the day, well, not at the end of the day, early in the morning, when you start recording something, you're going to have an argument with a guitarist or whoever. Are you going to go with Neve? Are you going to go with API? Are you going to go with SSL? What kind of preamp are we going to use? What kind of cable are we going to use? What kind of strings are you going to put on? This is all character. That's all color. And it changes dramatically between different playback devices. So how on earth are you going to make that, argument to go with the SSL? Because it just sounds better. It has this nice color to it, or it's colorless or whatever. When you're listening on something that is completely out of whack. So that's the main reason why we are really pushing to develop headphones that are truly flat out of the box, plug them in, get as close as possible at least. And then with the software, you can get the kind of the idea of tolerances, basically, of how these colors can change, how much contrast there's going to be, and all of that will reflect in your mixing decisions.
That's a very interesting point. I always say in our coaching program that we have, that, by the way, Manel went through too before he started working with us and now became the co-host of the show. There's not a lot of emphasis on the whole gear part in what we do, and that's intentional because for most people, especially when they're starting out, gear is not the bottleneck these days. I'm not saying it's not important at all, but there's a lot of other things to work on first before you get out and buy expensive gear.
I
The
agree.
one exception, though, that I always mention in the beginning, and I ask every single person in there is, what are you listening on? What are you monitoring on? Because every single decision that you make is going to go through that giant filter. Like you just
Mm.
said, like you make detailed decisions on which type of preamp or EQ or whatever, but all of those decisions are going to get filtered through your listening device. And so you want that to be reliable. It doesn't necessarily have to be super flat or whatever. There's personal preference as well. You just have to know it really well and have to like working on it. It shouldn't be too fatiguing. And
Mm.
there's widely different opinions on that as well. So, I've always mixed on Atom monitors, for example, with the ribbon tweeters. I know a lot of peers who can't stand those. They are fatiguing to them. I like them. There's no right or wrong. And so this whole color and preference thing is important for many reasons. First of all, there is personal preference, and then second of all, everything you do goes through this filter. So I love the idea of having a flat headphone that you can tune if you want to in one way or the other, and you can use references or room emulations, but you don't have to. So that's a great way of looking at it, I think. Um, so I have one question from our community, actually, from Pablo, a friend of yours, Manel, who just joined the program. I was in touch with him. He asked me
Mm.
for headphone recommendations, and of course, Ollo was on the list. And then he asked me, "Hey, I saw they have the S4 and the S5, and then the X1 or whatever." And like he was wondering about the S5s because it said specifically for Atmos or spatial mixing. And then he was like, does that mean they are worse in stereo? Should I go for the S4 then because the others are only if I do spatial? Or should I, like, what's your answer for that? Because I wasn't able to answer it. I was interested in the S5s before, and I was honestly a little hesitant because I thought I don't really do a lot of Atmos work. So are those
Mm.
like spatial only headphones, or are they just as good in stereo? Should you go for the X1s or the S4s?
No, you should go for the X1 because they're just like the latest tech that we can do,
Okay.
without a doubt. But you can find S5X at really good pricing. Not with us anymore, but there are some resellers that still have those at
Yeah.
like super low price. You can get a really good pair. So the S5X, they were designed um, to support Dolby Atmos mixing. So we went to Synchron Stage in Vienna, which is a massive studio. It's so beautiful, amazing. And we captured that room, the frequency response of each individual speaker with the ear simulator, which is like a dummy head
Mhm.
and torso. So we captured all of those responses. And then based on that data, well, first we took the dummy head back to our lab, of course, and then we put our headphones on that same dummy. So the dummy or the ear simulator was the same simulator and it was listening to the same sources as they as we played them back in the studio. So when that meant that we could compare the frequency response and everything else from that studio with our headphones directly. And we could see, what are the differences in terms of frequency response of our headphones in comparison to that studio on that particular consistent simulator, right? Um, so based on that, we developed the frequency response and all the acoustic parameters of our headphones to get as close as possible to the frequency response and the characteristics of a certified Dolby room. So on that promise, we said, hey, we have the S5X now, which are specifically tuned to work with the Dolby Atmos material.
Right.
As time moved on, we've learned that the most important part about mixing immersive versus mixing stereo is the high end. So on the high end frequencies um, is where the objects that are placed in 3D virtual room, I guess, they live there. So it's all based on HRTLs, which we all have different, of course, but the way we position sound or localize sound around us is heavily reliant on the high spectrum of the sound source. So if you have a playback device that has slightly more high-end presence, it means we will be able to localize objects in a virtual space a lot better because of it. So the X1 now are tuned for stereo primarily, but with the software that comes with it, basically boosting a little bit the high end, we are kind of getting extremely close to the S5X target curve. So what we did is basically we took the S4 that you, Benedikt, enjoy for the past 4 or 5 years,
Yep.
and we took the S5, which is what the industry is kind of going to in a way, and we put them together into one headphone, so you can have one device for whatever you're doing, and you just utilize the power of software to get the idea of cross-checking and reverse-checking, your mixing.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for clarifying. But that means if someone finds a good pair of like an S5X somewhere, they can absolutely use it for stereo mixing too. There's
Sure.
nothing wrong about that.
No, of course not.
Yeah. Cool.
They are slightly brighter. That's the only thing. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's switch gears to a different topic real quick, and that is not just the topic of mixing, but also tracking, recording. And I mentioned in the beginning that I'm using these, and I really didn't think a lot about it. I just have these forever, multiple pairs of them, and then a couple of others too. They just work in the studio. So whenever I want to avoid bleed, I just go for these. It's not so much about how they sound. They're comfortable enough, work, do the job, period. Should I try and turn my S4s into closed ones and see what that does? Because I've never done it. I know you can do it with all those, but what is your opinion on that? And then Manel, I want to ask you a question as well here. Do you use one pair for everything, or do you have tracking and mixing headphones separately?
Funny thing here is that normally I prefer tracking with speakers.
Really?
Yeah, like when I'm tracking, not vocals, obviously, because
guitars,
obvious reasons, right? But when I'm tracking guitars and stuff like that, I prefer to use the speakers. But I think it's mostly because of the cable, not really because of the sound. So
I just wonder, because you work with a lot of I'm full-time mixing. I very rarely produce something. It's like just some fun projects here and there, or bigger records here and there, like once or twice a year, but the rest is mixing only. Manel is producing a lot and recording almost like every day or like regularly with artists from all over Europe, and like you record just a lot more. And so my question is, do you give especially the vocalists, the closed back headphones as a default, or do you have different ones when you mix and track and all that? And then
normally I use these ones for everything, and when a vocalist is here like singing, I give them these ones because they are closed, and then I have another ones that I use, but I only use them for those recording sessions. If it's like in my daily routine, I use those for everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, so I always went back and forth between opens for mixing, closed for tracking, and I've never tried converting my open Ollos to closed ones, but I know that it is kind of possible, and so I want your thoughts on that, Rok. Do you have to buy 2 different pairs for that, or can you get away with one? And yeah.
Well, obviously the closed. So imagine it like a guitar cabinet or a bass guitar cabinet. You have open back and have closed back cabinets, and they sound differently, don't they?
Yes.
So the acoustic, the character of the sound will of course change. So if you want to have like your mixing headphone that were tuned and designed to work as a mixing headphone, and you want to close them, of course they are no longer going to be great for mixing, or or maybe they will for you, who knows? But in terms of the frequency response, it will change, and there will be some new resonances introduced, so it's not going to be optimal for mixing anymore. And in terms of tracking, the question is, if you just put something like a backplate on the open back headphone, will that isolation of leakage or the leakage of sound be enough for you? If it is, then sure, go ahead and do that. But I would warn you that it's just a one-time thing. So it's not like a feature of our headphone. It's just something that you can do.
Okay, so it means you will get a little more isolation. You will get a little less bleed into the microphone, maybe a little more isolation from the outside. But it's not that you will transform the open headphones, the way they are designed to work, into like a completely closed pair of cans. It's just a different design altogether. It's not going to be a drastic difference, probably, right?
Yeah, it's it's a different thing. It's like, I mean, you can take a car and take off the roof and it's going to be a convertible,
Yeah.
right? So it's the same thing. Can you do it? Yes.
Mhm.
Should you? Probably not.
Okay. Do you have closed pair headphones? No, not really. It's like you're specializing in mixing headphones, right?
Yeah,
Open
currently
back.
we only
Yeah.
have the open back, closed back are in development.
Oh,
So
cool.
obviously we will have to eventually release one. I'm not sure about how they're gonna be positioned just yet.
Mhm.
Is it gonna be? Depends on the development
Mhm.
efforts, basically. If it's gonna be like the same chassis like we have right now, and just adjust it for the closed version, or are we gonna have a completely different approach and a completely different product line for the closed
Yeah.
headphones? I don't really know yet.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, this is a very important question that I just wanted to touch on because some of the people that we talk to, they want to get their first pair of decent headphones, and sometimes they don't want to buy two. They want to start with one kind of all-round pair. And in those cases, even though I fully agree that open headphones are the better choice for mixing most of the time, I oftentimes recommend getting a good closed pair in that case, because if they want to record and they have loud click tracks on there, or they want to track, anything with loud playback or even drums, like there's no way you can do that with like really open headphones. And so if it has to be one for everything, I recommend the closed ones. But I always say, like, if you at any point get to like serious mixing and you want to have a reliable playback system, it might be where it is worth investing in that and then treating it separately from the tracking. And so that's exactly what I do. I don't care really that much about the sound when I track, as long as it's good enough and comfortable to wear for the singers. But then when it comes to mixing, I'm looking for much different things. And
It depends on who you are as well. So I believe. Have you seen our documentary? We've released a documentary called "The Rabbit Hole of Trusting Sound."
no, I haven't seen that. Where can I see that?
It's on YouTube.
Oh, awesome. I'm gonna make a
Yeah.
note. Okay, cool.
So we've talked to like 20 A-level engineers, Grammy-winning engineers about how do you trust sound, basically. We explored all sorts of things, and one of those guys were basically a guitarist, Saturn Dowd from the UK, a really cool guy. And he said that when he was trying to pick the correct or the right headphones for him, in his case, it was extremely important that whatever he's hearing from the amp or whatever signal chain he does for the guitar, he wants to hear it as neutral as possible. So for him, it was not so much about, click tracks or stuff like that. It wasn't about just, I need to isolate myself. It's a
Yeah.
guitar, it's not the vocal anyway.
Sure.
So it was extremely important to get something that is raw enough or flat enough or boring enough so that when he's picking the, effects and cabinets and guitars, he has like a full room of different guitars so that he can actually make something fit with his client in every single situation every day in different studios. When you
Yeah.
travel, you need to have a reference that comes with you and make decision of a cabinet choice that you've never heard before in a room that you've never been in before. So all of that prompted to him to get a headphone that is like truly flat, and for him it was irrelevant if they're open or closed back. It was
Interesting.
just like, can I get something that I can trust? And that was basically the whole documentary, is different angles
Yeah.
on this word of trust, how different people, different engineers, different professions within the music industry will have a different idea of what trusting sound actually means and how to achieve it. So it's a funny 40 minutes,
Awesome.
sessions.
Yeah. I'm gonna check that out. That's cool. Yeah. Yamadel, you want to say something?
Yeah,
ahead.
I have a little thing that I want to bring up.
Of course.
Because there's like lots of our listeners, they are maybe starting and they are also thinking about their headphones and stuff like that. So I'm gonna compare this like headphones thing to the guitars thing, right? Because I've been a teacher for some years, like a guitar teacher for some years, not anymore, at least for now. And some of my students, when they are starting, they start to play guitars with guitars that are so crappy that are very difficult to play, like that there's no way you can play them in tune, right? So I would say that it's better if you get, if you can, of course, if you can get a better guitar at the beginning, because, it will be in tune. So if something is wrong, it's because of you, not because of the guitar. So I would like to translate this to headphones, because it seems obvious that if you have high quality headphones, then you're gonna hear better, like a better frequency response. But if you're starting, you're not gonna be able to listen to those little things, because it's very precise. You need to mix a lot to really get there. But do you think, does it make sense to get a good pair of headphones from the beginning?
Versus starting with a cheaper one, you mean, and then working your
Yes.
way up so you can learn faster? Is that what you mean? Rok,
Is
what
this
do
a
you
question
think?
for me? Or
Yeah,
is
yeah,
this
yeah,
a
yeah.
question for
No,
Benedikt?
no, for you, sure. I'm interested in hearing that as well. It's a good point, Manel, because maybe it points out the problems in the mixes faster, and maybe you're having a harder time learning on headphones that don't tell you the truth. But also, you say that at the beginning, it might be hard to even hear those differences, and so. Yeah, so what are your thoughts? It's a good question.
Very good
Go
question.
ahead. I have thoughts on this. Yeah.
It's spot on. It's the same question. So since we're playing with analogies, let's go into cooking, right? So
All right.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's the same
that's a
thing.
language we all speak, I think.
Yeah.
Right, Manel? So
So
yeah.
it's the same thing. How are you gonna, know if your pan or whatever tools you use in your kitchen are they any good? Are they consistent and so on? How can they cut a really good steak? A knife is a knife, $20 to $100. But then at the end of the day, it's I believe that was something that Leo Abraham said, a really cool engineer, guitarist again from the UK. He's been working with Adele, Christina Aguilera, and so on. Really cool guy. He said sometimes it's important to have a piece of gear that inspires you. And it's something that maybe sometimes we forget about, that what we do is emotional, it's music, it's about storytelling, it's about connecting with people in some way for
Very true.
Spotify or whatever. So whoever is making that, if he's a cook, right? If you do this analogy, do you really want to have, a restaurant or go to a restaurant where a cook is completely uninspired to cook you a meal? Probably not, right? So it's the same thing with music.
Yeah.
Do you really want to listen to an artist who's really uninspired to do it? So there you go. If $500 for headphones inspires you more than 90 for a plastic version of it, hey, maybe they are worth, investing a little bit more.
That's a good point. You kind of answered your way around the question, but it's still valid. It's still valid. But it's still a good argument, actually. And I personally do believe that you can learn faster with a reliable monitoring system because it tells you the truth, and you can. Yeah, I think it's good for the learning experience. As much as I understand people wanting to keep the expenses low in the beginning and kind of work their way up, but then again, if you have the budget, maybe it will also save you money long term because then you don't have to buy 3 pairs until you get to the good ones, and you can just start with the good ones.
Yeah.
That's the other thing too. To add to that question, Manel, the whole topic of choosing headphones, and regardless if you're a beginner or not, we don't just have beginners on here; we have professionals also listening to this. But when someone chooses a new pair of headphones, how do you go about this personally? So for myself, I can say I've went to Thomann and big music stores and just put on a bunch of headphones and compared them. Then I listened to whatever my friends had, and I tried to listen to as many as possible. But then I heard about the Ollos. I don't even remember how, but I was like, okay, there's no way for me to try these. I'm just going to have to order some and see if I like them. And I ordered them. I liked them. I kept them. End of story. But when now someone goes out and hears this and we recommend this, recommendations are one thing. Is it still a good idea to just follow the recommendation, buy it, and then if you like it, just keep it? Or do you actually recommend trying many different pairs because it is personal preference? Is that even useful? Will it confuse you even more? And then if you have the chance, what do you listen for? I know this is, again, another long question. This is just how my brain works sometimes on these things. But for me, I remembered how confused I was after listening to all these headphones. And then I thought, well, okay, 3 or 4 here, I don't like these, definitely. But then the other ones, they all are great. What do I go for? And so it left me very confused. Then when I found the Ollos, some time went by, I put on the Ollos. I had a really good feeling about them, and I just kept them without any further comparison at this point. But yeah, how do you answer this question? How to find your pair of headphones? How much of it is personal preference? And what do you listen for when you compare? And I don't know, Manel, you can also go like how you go about it, and then I want to hear from Rok because there must be a reason for why you built your own instead of just using what was out there.
Sure. I mean, let's go with Manel first.
Okay.
Okay. So my way is very, very simple. Like I'm not a, as you all should know by now, I'm not a big like nerd, like gear nerd. So my process to do this is ask someone who is a gear nerd, like Benedikt. So
this is kind of our dynamic here. Manel is like, it's really true. Manel is much more of an artist still himself, and I consider myself an artist too, but I'm definitely more of a gear nerd, and like, so that's kind of cool that we always have these different perspectives. So go ahead.
So where maybe Benedikt would find it enjoyable to try 30 headphones and see the differences and all that, I would prefer to Benedikt telling me, buy these headphones, and then I'll go and buy those headphones if I can, of course. Like, so yeah, I just I would get used to them. Like, I don't know. And something that I want to point out is that I think it's great and lovely that Rok, who is the super like tech guy who's making these headphones, he's always reminding us that it's about the feelings and the things that we want to transmit, with the headphones or speakers or whatever, and not about the numbers and tech stuff, which is also useful, of course, to make these things happen. But at the end, the most important things are the feelings and the lovely things that we want to transmit on these things.
Yeah, I agree. That's cool. That's cool hearing it from. That's actually right. It's cool that hearing it from the founder and builder of these headphones, that it is really not so much about just the numbers, but about if it inspires you, how it translates, what does that all even mean. So that's actually a good perspective. So yeah, thank you.
So sorry to sum up my answer. I would just look for someone you trust who is more experienced than you and who can, make those decisions for you, basically. Then if you don't like it, then you can try other things. But yeah.
And if you like it, you just get used to it and let other people do the technical comparison, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Just there's plenty of reviews on YouTube if you want to compare or whatever.
Yeah. Fair perspective. So what do you think, Rok? How do you go about choosing headphones?
Well, obviously I'm biased, so
yeah, sure.
It makes no sense, answering this question, but it does make sense maybe discussing, because actually what you're asking is not just headphones. It's really about gear in general. Well, maybe it's not even about audio. It's about where do you put your money in general. Right? How do you invest? How do you save enough? How do you make sure that you're not strict into something? How do you avoid making a mistake? Right? So, I don't know. In my perspective, it's definitely what Manel said. It's about trusting, the circle of people that you have around you. It's usually 3 or 4 friends, in one way or another, that will help you make a decision. They're not going to make it for you, but will help you make one. Unless you're buying something that you really have no clue about. So for me, that would be buying a video gear, at least a few years back. I had no idea about any of those things.
Yeah.
So it was just like, hey, buddy, which camera should I buy? And that was literally it. And he went on like 20 minutes rambling. And at the end, it was like, all right, so which one now?
Yeah.
And then he just said, it was Panasonic Lumix, I believe. And okay, send me the link. That's it. Yeah. So I wouldn't go and double check or watch reviews or anything like that. because the trust factor is important. And the same thing happens with consistent gear in the studio, or even consistent artists that you bring in, or session guitarists, just session drummers, and so on. Who are you gonna call for your next project? It's the person that's been reliable and that you trust, that will show up, will not be drunk, etc. So that comes down to just trust in someone, basically in someone, maybe sometimes in something or some process.
Mhm.
That's basically all I can say. But I will flip this question around. So Manel and Benedikt, how would you choose your AI tool to help you in your mixing process? How would you know which AI to go for? Would you even consider it?
Oh, that's a whole different conversation, but I see where you're getting with this. So I'm not against AI. I'm like one of the few people in my circle. I always play devil's advocate a little bit, where I'm like, I don't really care about. I am a gear nerd, but I don't care about the gear that much. As like, I care about the result, and I don't care how I get there. That's what I'm trying to say. So as long as I have creative control and I can tell the AI what I want, and as long as I have the vision and the outcome is what I envision and what I have in my head, I don't mind if I do it or if it's been done for me. I just don't want something else to make certain decisions for me. I want to make the decisions, and then if I can prompt accordingly and I get the result, it's no different for me than choosing the gear, turning the knob, and making it happen that way. It's the sound in my head, and it needs to come out of the speakers, and how I get there doesn't matter as much. As long as the art itself, what I want to communicate, and the vision I have is what I want. So this is my point and like my perspective on AI. However, I would pick, to answer your question, I would pick an AI to use based on its, at the moment at least, based on its usefulness in terms of workflow. So I don't really use it a lot or at all actually when I mix right now, because I feel like there's no.
Sorry, I'm jumping
Yeah,
in,
no,
but that means that you would actually try it. You would
Yeah.
go through a trial and
Yes.
error
Yes.
process of selecting, documenting, figuring out what works for you.
Yes.
So
I
basically
would.
the same thing that you did with 30 pair of headphones.
Yes, exactly. And in terms of AI, it matters to me that there is a. To me, it is more a work. I see it like an assistant. It's a workflow enhancement tool that helps me do what I'm doing anyways, but maybe faster. Maybe I can get to the most important decisions faster with less fatigue. Maybe I can stay objective for longer. It's just like automating other repetitive tasks, that kind of thing. I don't think of it as something that creates art for me. It just helps me get there faster. This is how I think about AI. And honestly, it's similar to how I think about monitoring and headphones. It should get me to what I want faster with less headache and with more confidence. And if I can trust these things and I know that what's coming out of them, if I know exactly what that means, I can get to the most important decisions faster. I don't have to reference as much. I don't have to do a lot of ABs. I just don't even think about it. It just becomes a part of me and I can get to my result faster. So all of these things are workflow tools. And when I did the comparison with the headphones, I remember I was confused because my goal was, let me find a pair of headphones where I feel like I hear exactly what's going on. It lets me work fast and I'm confident and I enjoy it and it's not fatiguing. And then I can mix better. And then I tried it and I found, shit, there are many different headphones who do that, but they're different. So what am I going for? There were a couple of ones that I could rule out right away because it was not detailed, it was too fatiguing, or it was like something was really bothering me. But then there were a couple where I was like, yeah, I could probably get used to all of these. And so now which do I choose? And then I answered the question by saying, well, it doesn't matter. I pick one of these, get used to them, and I can get work done. And then the Ollos came and I tested them. They were in the same kind of category. I just loved them and I just kept them because I liked a couple of things even more about them than the other headphones. Part of it was how they were built, the repair aspect, how they felt, how they look, the whole experience. It was just the package I was looking for. And so I didn't question it anymore and I went for it. There might be other headphones out there that I would love even more in terms of sound. I don't know, but I don't care because I trust these. They had everything I needed and I stopped thinking about it at this point. I never questioned the decision, basically. So that's how I remember this journey. But yeah, so I guess it is personal preference, and maybe it just needs to be good enough and and a package that you're happy and excited about, and then you just get used to it. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. Although I'm sure Manuel will have a different opinion about AI and how to select something for your studio.
Well, I will. I would wait for Benny to do all the research and then ask him.
No.
No, but the thing is that I'm not AI savvy. Like, I don't really know in which way that. I mean, I guess there probably is some AI there that can help me, but I would love to have something that I can tell him like, "Hey, please export me these tracks with these parameters now. Thank you. Bye." Instead of going like, why should I export here and how, and yeah, I should keep in this track, I should keep the reverb, and then in the other I should not, whatever,
Oh, sorry to interrupt, Manel, but there's one thing I need to say it here in case anyone is listening who's making DAWs, and I know maybe the Steinberg guys are listening. I know some of them, and we've collaborated before. So if you're listening, makers of Cubase or anybody else who does DAWs, if there's one AI feature I would absolutely love, and I would pay a lot of money for actually, is if a DAW or any software would just tell me while I'm working, there would be a pop-up that says, "Hey, you've done this thing 15 times today. Would you like to automate this? It would go like this. Or would you mind creating a shortcut or a macro for this or whatever?" Just a thing that recognizes the things that I do over and over again that are kind of useless and wasting time. And it will remind me of that, show me how I do it, and next time I don't have to do it again. That would be awesome. Like workflow tools like that. This is something I want. I can still make my art, but I want the tool to make it easier for me. So yeah. End of rant.
Yeah. So yeah, I just have to wait for Benedikt to do this.
So we are all kind of creatures of habit, right? So we would all, it doesn't matter, is it headphone? Is it about AI? Is it about speakers? Is it about the next session player that you want to bring in? Whatever it is, we just kind of go in this same kind of loops, I guess, or cycles, because we trust the process through our, through growing up, throughout our lives. We've learned what works for us. So for Benedikt, being a gearhead, it works to check things out. For me as well, I'm an engineer. So when it comes to audio, I will dive in. When it comes to video, I don't care. I'm going to call a friend. So we all kind of reserve these different shape and forms of making a decision. It's a different process for everyone, and each one of us. It's obviously going to be different. So the point of trying to get to this is because a few questions back, you asked me, how do you make a decision to buy a headphone? What do you listen for? So now after this debate, it's quite clear. It's impossible to answer this question. It comes down to your preference of, dealing with the world, dealing with options, dealing with trust issues, by the way, which is extremely important.
Yeah.
And really trust a brand name like Ollo that you've never heard about before. It's made in Slovenia, and we're going to ship it to New Zealand, right? So it's difficult, right? So and if you lived with Sennheiser, maybe your parents did. In my case, my dad was a drummer, so he's been using, and also a singer, so he's been using, for example, Shure microphones, like for 50 years. Guess what? I'm gonna buy Shure microphone, right? So there's multi-layered. These decisions are so multi-layered that for me, especially being biased as company owner, it's completely impossible to answer this in a fair manner.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Thank you. But this is a great answer, actually, if you think about it that way. That is a really great answer. And maybe if someone is interested in trying all those things, they have to go through a process like I did, only to find out that maybe you don't have a definite answer and you still can get a pair that you're happy with. And, and maybe someone else will have a clear winner after 30 headphones, and that's fine. So, yeah. Cool. Now, to go full circle here to kind of the beginning, there must be a reason, though, why you just didn't pick a headphone that was out there, but wanted to build your own instead. What was the main reason for why didn't you just go out, test a few headphones, find one that you really like, and then build your own? I mean, you started with the tactile, and you explained all of that, but still, you could have just bought a great pair of headphones.
Well, I tried the most obvious way, and this was just back in the days. It was just mostly forums, and just checking, what kind of headphones, which model would you recommend for mixing, and about like 10 years ago, a little more, it was the HD 650 from
Yep.
Sennheiser that came up like here and like very often, very often, very often. The price tag is reasonable, 300 or something, reasonable. So I went with those, and they completely failed me. I'm not saying they are bad headphones; they're great headphones, but they didn't work for me. So the thing that came there was like, okay, this don't work. Okay, let me try AKG again. At the time, it was 712, I believe,
Yeah.
K7112,
Yeah,
the
I know.
orange ones, the reference kind of thing. And again, they just didn't work. So I was getting frustrated. So then it was like, hey, buddy, tell me what you're using. And it was the Audio Technica M50X at the time.
Yep.
Like very popular headphone, extremely popular. And it was like great bass, but still didn't translate for me. So at that point, I kind of gave up and I said, listen, I'm just going to try to build a headphone that works for me. And it was like a side gig, a side project. It was like no intention to get into this space of, have a company that makes headphones. It was just, having fun. I'm trying to address this issue as a side benefit, I guess.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned before, a buddy wanted one, and another friend, and another friend, and another, and another, and another. And eventually, it's turned into a company where we don't make tactile transducers anymore. We just shifted to headphones alone. And right now we only have one model. So it's only the X1. It's only for mixing, and all the resources and all, the decade of experience all put into that one single product. That's also one of the reasons why you can buy it for a reasonable price. As you mentioned, so we're in the middle of this podcast because we focus everything on one product. The supply chain is one supply chain. The stock that we have to keep is one stock. So all of these things can make a really good product reasonably priced in the marketplace.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Yeah. And this goes to show again, you tried these three things that are very popular, didn't work for you, but there's a lot of people who made really great records with those headphones.
Of course,
So, it's like personal preference. And and so you went and made your own. And so at the end of the day, we have a lot to choose from, wonderful tools, and everyone needs to make up their own mind. Yeah. This is, totally makes sense. There would be just one pair of headphone if it was that easy, right? So
yeah, it's a rabbit hole. That's
Yes.
why. That's also why we titled our documentary "The Rabbit Hole of Trusting Sound," because it never ends. It's impossible to get to the bottom.
Sure, 100%. Yeah, awesome. So, Rok, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Of course, everything we mentioned will be in the show notes for this. It will be in the YouTube description. It will be on your podcast app and on the website. If you go to the selfrecordingband.com/podcast, you find all the episodes. And if you type in the number of the episode, so let's say the selfrecordingband.com/251, if this is episode 251, which it currently is, then it will take you to the show notes page directly. In those show notes, Rok, what will be put there? Where should people go? What's the name of your website?
Just go on Google, search Ollo Audio, or try searching, best possible headphones for mixing, and then get the 30 pairs that are recommended there. Try them out, and hopefully you'll stick with us at the end.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we'll put the website there and also social media and everything you have, so people can check it out. I can really recommend this brand. Otherwise, I wouldn't do this episode and talk about it like that. But yeah, you have to make up your own mind. I also know, I can say that, I've recommended a lot in the past and actually sold a couple back when you had the resale model that you had. I also know that, not often, but there was one or two people who said, everyone agreed they were great headphones, but they said, like, it's not for me. So I'm not saying this is the end-all, be-all. There will be people who prefer others. That's totally fine. But I really recommend them. I think you should give them a try. And yeah, make up your own mind. Look them up. So it's all going to be in the show notes. Thank you, Manel, for being here with us today as well. And Rok, anything we forgot we need to mention? Anything we should point listeners to? Anything you want to add to this?
No, not really. I mean, unless you want to talk politics. So
No, I'm definitely not into that right now. This is a whole other rabbit hole, and pretty much a shit show at the moment. But yeah, we'll leave it with that. Thanks so much, man. Thank you for taking the time to do this. And everyone listening, watching, thank you for joining us today. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
stay safe and
Bye.
sound. Bye.